John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN.com, has his Eagles score prediction on our website right now, 97.3 ESPN.com. We're going to dive into the game a little deeper with John McMullen. It was at the NovaCare Center today where Doug Peterson addressed the media for the final time before the game. And interesting little side note here, John, is Ryan Matthews sent home, I guess, with an illness, but they are anticipating him playing. Is that accurate?
That is accurate. As of now, he was sent home before practice. A lot of people are sick in the Philadelphia area, so it doesn't surprise me that he was sent home with an illness. But right now, the Eagles expect him to play. You still get the feeling, though, that maybe because of the lack of success that Ryan has had in recent weeks, partially due to the ankle injury, averaging 3.3 yards a carry, you sort of get the feeling all week that they want to get a few more touches for Wendell Smallwood and Kenyon Barner. I wouldn't be surprised if that was the plan. So we'll keep an eye on that. And certainly the illness plays into it if he's not going to be 100%, because the Eagles really, really need to get this running game going. They've stuck with it. I've agreed with Frank Reich's mentality that you got to keep running the football even if you're not having the optimum success that you would like. And they've done that, but they need a little bit more production from that position. There's no question about that.
Yeah, and John, if you're going to run the ball, this is the week. The Redskins give up, 5.1 yards a carry, 130 yards per game. This is the team that you should be able to move the ball on the ground against.
Yeah, and obviously it's a road game, and you're always concerned about a rookie quarterback, even though Carson has proven to be very poised. Anytime you go on the road, you're concerned with the crowd noise. That kind of, I think there were two delay of game penalties in Detroit. So no matter how savvy you are as a rookie, communication is always an issue when you're on the road, and getting a good running game only helps with that, because obviously you're not dropping back. You don't need those signals coming from the offensive lineman as much. So you always want to have a good running game no matter what, but certainly on the road even more so than when you're playing at home.
Yeah, we're talking with John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN.com. How about the prognosis for Leotis McKelvin?
Well, it's going to be a game-time decision. He's listed as questionable, but you get the feeling that, at least I do, the Eagles are going to err on the side of caution. Jalen Mills spoke like he was going to play today. He split first-team reps with Ron Brooks in the past when Leotis was down. The plan was to start Ron Brooks on the outside and sort of kick him inside in the nickel. So as much as you play nickel in today's NFL, that essentially makes both starters anyway. But you just sort of get the feeling Leotis didn't practice on Wednesday and Thursday. He was out there today. It went relatively well, but this has been an issue now going on a month. So I think the Eagles' plan is to get this quieted down, the hamstring issue, so they can count on him later in the season. And you just get the feeling that it's going to be Jalen Mills and Ron Brooks.
Sports Bash here on 97.3 ESPN. We're talking with John McGowan, a little Eagles-Redskins matchup this week. And, John, I know a lot of the conversation this week's have been about Big V. What did Doug have to add about Big V today?
Well, they're going forward. That's the plan. He's going to be the right tackle, and hopefully for the full 10 weeks of when Lane Johnson is suspended. And we'll see how it works out. It's an interesting decision. As I've said, I understand it. I understand the thought process behind it of not wanting to upset the apple cart, and hopefully it works out, because if it does, this is the best case scenario. You have a young ascending player, and not only for this year, because think about it, guys, Jason Peters obviously is in the tail end of his career, so If you can sort of answer that question and say Vaitai can be your right tackle, well, then Lane Johnson can flip over to the left side. You solve two different positions. So not only does it make sense in the short term, it makes sense in the long term if he develops. But that's a big if. It starts this week, and it's going to be a difficult test for him each and every week. As I mentioned, you're going back to a guy who never had a first-team rep until this week and spent most of training camp on the third team. So it's interesting, and it's something you're going to have to keep an eye on Sunday because while Washington has its issues defensively, as you mentioned, Mike, stopping the run, Ryan Kerrigan has been sort of an underrated pass rusher over the past number of years, and it's going to be a big test for Vaitai early.
Also today, I know Coach was asked about the Eagles generally have success on the road. There's a stretch of 4 or 5 road games coming up. What did Doug say about what it takes to be a good road team?
Well, you have to do all the normal things that you think of, and that stay away from penalties is one. They did not do that last week, and obviously that was a big part of that loss. If you think about losing by 1 point on the road, and the penalty disparity is 14-2 in a negative fashion, that sums up the game right there. I mean, you're losing by 1 point, and you have 14 penalties, so you have to play a very clean game, a very smart game, something they didn't do against the Lions. You can't turn the football over, obviously. That also hurt them against the Lions late. You have the fumble from Ryan Matthews, and you can argue whether it should have been a dead ball. The bottom line is it was called a fumble on the field. And then you have the interception when they're trying to go down the field and win it. So you have to play clean on the road. And if you don't, you're not going to win in this league. And I think the Eagles understand that.
John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN.com. It was interesting. Somebody brought up today that they had Ruben Randall and Chris Givens in here, and that, hey, that's an area, much like last year, they were not down the field. You know, their receivers are not down the field kind of guys. What are they trying to do in lieu of not having that big play wide receiver?
Well, that's one of the issues, and Doug kind of stammered with that, immediately pointed to Nelson Aguilar. And if Nelson Aguilar is your deep threat, you have a problem. And the Eagles do have a problem. They don't have a deep threat, and they haven't had a deep threat since Desean Jackson was here. And that's always an issue, always sort of a narrative when the Eagles play the Redskins because it's such an obvious one in the fact that they miss what Desean Jackson brought to this offense, and they're continuing to look for a replacement. They haven't found it. Dorial Green-Beckham, maybe as he gets more into the offense, and we've talked about that from week to week, seeing more touches. He can give you a different kind of deep threat because of his size on 50-50 balls, but he had a chance to catch that fade in the end zone. He dropped the football. He's got to be more physical in going for those types of things. Josh Huff has the speed, but as Doug mentioned, and we all know, he's used on short to intermediate routes, and there's a good reason for that because he can't run routes and he can't create separation. So this is a problem area for the Eagles, and we've talked about it going back to the offseason through the OTAs. This is a weak position for the Eagles. It's a work in progress, and they need to add talent to that particular spot on the roster. Unfortunately, week 6 of the NFL season, that's not the time where you can add talent. And the Eagles have to go with what they have, and that's a problem for them because they don't have a legitimate deep threat that can scare the opposing defense down the field.
Yeah, interesting. I saw a tweet from one of the scribes the other day referring to Riley Cooper, who a couple of years ago, he was a big play threat. That year that Nick Foles was, launching it down the field for 27 touchdowns, Riley Cooper had 33 catches of over 20 yards in that season. And then last year he was a disaster. Really, the last 2 years he was a disaster. But he was a guy that was kind of a big play guy.
Well, yeah, and that's what Doug was kind of talking about with DGB, not mentioning Riley, but it's the same mentality. There's different ways you can go about it. And Riley that year was a big physical guy. And if you remember, Nick Foles had a number of underthrows where he would come back to the football and make a big play on it. And that's a different way. You're accomplishing the same goal. You're not doing it with speed necessarily, but hey, an explosive play in this league is an explosive play no matter how you get it. And that's what I think they're hoping for down the road with Dorial Green Beckham. But he's got to show more consistency. He's got to play like he's 6'5" and 240 pounds. And on that fade pass that should have been a touchdown, he didn't play like that. Because even if he was interfered with, as some have argued, and you could say it was a borderline non-call, he's big enough and physical enough for that not to matter. He's still got to come down with the football. And maybe that could be something they can use down the line, as I said, with this 50-50 balls, do it in a different fashion. But we haven't seen that to this point. And until we do, it's tough to project and say it's going to be there.
Now, John, I know Mike's probably going to bust on me for this, but the kicker, Caleb Sturgis, Doug was asked about him today. And so in a road game like this, could he be important?
Well, the kicker can always be important. And I think we now know, after watching Cody Parkey in Cleveland in his first game there, the Eagles made the right decision. Even though Cody Parkey was really, really good his rookie season here before he had the core muscle injuries, he just was not the same guy. And Caleb Sturgis is probably not as good as Cody Parkey was that rookie season, but he's been rock solid since he's been brought in. And he's an important part of this team. And anytime you expect a division game on the road, it's probably going to be a one-possession game. In a one-possession game, that could mean a field goal to win it. And Caleb has been very, very consistent to this point.
So what do you think it comes down to this week against the Redskins? What are some of the intangibles that the Eagles have to pull off to win?
Well, I think offensively, the Redskins are down to their backup safeties. So I think the Eagles need to take advantage of the middle of the field, throwing the football. And that could be a strength, but Zach Ertz has got to prove he's healthy again. And if you remember that 15 reception game he had, which is a franchise record against the Redskins, he needs to be a big part of this game plan. They have to attack down the field. And if Jordan Reed's not going to go, and he's questionable, but he didn't practice again today, I would imagine it's going to be very difficult for the Redskins to play him politically in this environment with 6 documented concussions. If he's not on the field, the Eagles really have to take advantage of that, because Vernon Davis, Niles Paul, not the same type of players. So that means you can do a little bit more with your outside coverage, and I think Philadelphia needs to really, really clamp down on that and realize they don't have to worry about the tight ends as much.
Interested in this one, earlier we were discussing with Sal Paolantonio. He said the Redskins blitz 29% of the time, most in the NFC East. We know Carson Wentz has been very good against the blitz. So does Washington come after Wentz on Sunday?
Yeah, I mean, that tends to be a feel for the game on Sunday. But you're right. I mean, Carson's been lights out against the blitz. Last week, it was 7 for 8 against the blitz. He just continues to really, really handle it well, and it speaks to his preparation. And it'll be interesting to see if Washington has seen the same things on film and starts to back off on that and play more coverage. Because as we always talk about, the default setting in the NFL is when you play a young quarterback to blitz and force them into mistakes. But that's been the exact opposite thing you should do with Carson Wentz. And that's going to be something that's very interesting, because I think the Redskins should back off and play more coverage. But their history says they're going to come after him. And that's just one of those chess moves that makes football so interesting, because if they do it, I think the Eagles will have a chance to hurt them down the football field.
Well, John, your pick is posted on 97.3ESPN.com, but how about you let the listeners in on what your pick is for this week now?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a tough spot. I think Washington's a better team than most people in Philadelphia realize, especially with the skill position people. Even without Jordan Reed, they got a ton of guys that can hurt you. It starts with Desean Jackson, but Pierre Garcon, Jamison Crowder, a lot of good receivers. Even Josh Doxson's not going to play. They're really loaded at that wide receiver position. And I just think it's a NFC East game at home. I think the Redskins are going to find a way to hold serve and win the game 27-21.
27-21. All right, there's John's pick. He goes Redskins 27-21. We'll have picked the perfect score coming up in 1 hour from right now here on the Sports Bash. John, of course, as always, enjoy the football games this weekend, and we will recap it all on Monday.
Hey, thank you, guys. Enjoy the games.